Alright, so the other day we ended with the challenges of nationalism in Italy, so I'm going to pick up there. Today you'll continue handwriting your notes. When I get done with nationalism, you'll continue into imperialism. Two different subjects, still under the same unit. So remember that we talked about the challenges of nationalism in Italy. I know it's a lot to write, but it's going to be okay. First of all, in 1861, Italy's finally going to unify. Um, they're going to have some issues. There's going to be some things that are against them, and it's going to be poverty. You have people who are poor, they're hungry, don't have any money, um, and they are living in less conditions, which means like they're living in, not the best housing or living with a lot of people in one house, things like that. Regional differences. It's just like in America. They have to excuse this kid. His kid's allergies are acting up, so excuse my voice. When we talk about America, America is one nation. Okay, we're one whole nation, and but we have regional differences. The South is different from the North. The North and the South are different from the Midwest. We're different from the West Coast. We're different from the Deep South. You're different from Texas. Like, all regions have different practices and different cultures and things like that. When we talk about suffrage reform, suffrage is always going to deal with voting. So when you hear the word suffrage, you need to think about voting. It made it so that only or all tax-paying males can vote. Okay, what you need to understand with nations during this time, even though we're talking about the 1800s, women are not going to get the same options as men. Workers' reform. People wanted to work less hours, and they didn't want child labor. They wanted to they improved transportation, they improved industry, and also they're going to form the Triple Alliance with Austria, Hungary, and Germany. What you understand about alliances is that the Triple Alliance will be established in the 1800s. Later in the 1900s, you'll get the Triple Entente. Alliances, like we've always talked about throughout this year, I told you they're like your best friends. They got your back. Okay? And this Triple Alliance is an alliance of protection, but it is going to lead to alliances are going to cause other nations to feel fear in Europe, and alliances are always, they can be taken as a good thing, but they can also be taken as a threat to other nations. Now we're going to talk about Germany. Germany is also going to have German unification, so make sure on your paper you put Germany. We're still talking about nationalism, and you're going to put German unification. After Napoleon, because remember, Napoleon took over a large amount of Europe and created this empire for France. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 are going to create the German Confederation. A confederation is a political union of several independent countries. It's just like what I always think about is in the Civil War, we had the Confederate States, or like the South. It was kind of like a confederation because what our southern states did is they made themselves independent and created their own political union when we succeeded from the Union. So you had the Union in the North, and then you had the Confederation in the South. And that was like their own independent states running the show in this war. First guy that you're going to deal with German unification, which you go ahead and take a look at his clothes. I know you're going to make fun of his pants. Yes, they're really high. But you have Frederick Wilhelm the, what number is this? Fourth, okay? He's from Prussia. Now, what he's going to do is he's going to promise democracy, which, is like a government for the people. And he's going to say, he's going to get a constitution to those who want to unify Germany. But then, instead of holding and keeping and maintaining his promises, what he will do instead is that he will go back on all of them. And he's going to lie to revolutionaries. Because what he's going to do is paint this ideal portrait of what he's got planned for Germany. And a lot of people are going to unite behind him. Revolutionaries are going to be like, hey, that sounds awesome. And then he's going to be like, just kidding. Okay? Um, the Zollverein Plan. It's something that's going to be initiated in Germany, and it is going to be an economic alliance between the German states. So if you look here, and you can see that it kind of evolves over time, because you got 1834 and then 1854 right here, these colors, so you can see who joined. Oh. And what's going to happen is that in 1834, to make things a little bit better, they're going to remove tariffs, which, remember, tariffs are like taxes on products and things like that. Um, this guy is Otto von Bismarck. Now, later, Otto von Bismarck will come into play when it comes down to Germany, and what he's going to do is support the concept of Realpolitik, which is a practical way of governing. Um, when we say use the word practical, you have to think about, like, I always think about common sense. People who are practical practice common sense. So he's going to, it's just like when we talk kind of like Thomas Paine had thought it was common sense that America should break away from Britain. Otto von Bismarck is going to try to use the most practical ways in governing this newly unified Germany. He's going to believe in increasing the military. Now, there are going to be a couple wars, though. It's going to happen. The Austro-Persian War is going to unite northern Germany. So those like provinces and areas up in northern Germany are going to unite. Then the Franco-Persian War will unite all of Germany. So by 1871, after these two wars, you have Germany completely united together as a whole. Now, there are going to be a couple things that are going to challenge the nationalism in Germany. First of all, what kind of government are we going to have? The states retained the power and decided on federalism. So what the states had, because you had German states, like city, like what we had in America, they decided that the states will retain some powers, and they decide on federalism. If you remember from before, when we talk about the American Revolution, federalism shares power between the states and the national government, okay? There are another couple of things that have influenced Germany for a long time. Church's influence. You're going to have a religious aspect to Germany. Guys, if you remember correctly, the area where Martin Luther came from was Germany. Germany's going to they're becoming industrial and reforming industry during this time, and they are going to be part of the Triple Alliance. So remember that France and Germany are going to be part of this Triple Alliance. And I told you alliances have pros and cons. Austria-Hungary is the next nation you're going to talk about. Right, Austria-Hungary down. I'm going to talk to you about a couple things that are going on with them during this nationalist movement. There are some problems with Austria-Hungary, and the biggest problem is that they have too many groups of people. They have the Croats and the Serbs, the Czechs, the Poles, the Ukrainians, the Germans, the Magyars, the Romanians, and the Italians, and the list could go on. And what you need to understand is that when you have too many groups of different types of people, and this is not like a racist thing in any means, but all of these people have different culture, different history, some have different languages, and some of them have different beliefs and religions, and you put them all in one area and they are going to fight a lot of times. And they can have an peaceful existence, but as far as politics and their history and things like that go, they're not going to necessarily agree on things, because each one of these groups has a different type of perspective. Now, you're going to have a monarch named Metternich. Now, he's going to resist independence movements by the people in Austria and Hungary. He's going to censor newspapers. He has a secret police to spy on people. He is serious. Like, he does not like anyone who is trying to change the government or the government system. Like, secret police, even they're creeping around on people trying to see if they're part of these independence movements that are talked about in the first bullet. Now, one thing that he's going to do is create a dual monarchy, which is Austria and in Hungary. So that's how you get Austria-Hungary. And that's going to happen in 1867. This is him in this picture. He looks like he would have some secret police. Now, Austria-Hungary, they each had their own parliaments, but they shared one leader. So you still have your lawmaking branch of parliament, and it's separate in their country, but they're still under one dude. What's his friend, Joseph the First? They have ministries of war. They shared that, the ministries of finance, and then foreign affair divisions. So they will share these branches. So you have one leader, Ministries of Wars is going to deal with warfare and things like that. Finance deals with the money and the economy. Foreign affairs is going to deal with exactly foreign affairs. So you're dealing with outside countries. Remember that domestic is home, that word domestic, and that foreign means away or outside or different. Just like if we're dealing with France, that is a foreign issue because France is a foreign country to us. They are, yes, they are our allies, but they are another nation. Do you understand what I'm saying? So foreign affairs deal with things abroad, overseas, away from America, other countries. Now, this dual monarchy is going to last until 1918, and ultimately what will happen is that after World War I, they will divide. Now, the Ottoman Empire is known as the Eastern Question. And when you look at maps during this time, the Ottoman Empire is located to the east of the rest of the European countries. So if you look right here in this area, Ottoman Empire from 1798 to 1923. So you can see that what lasted from, Miss Cannon doesn't have her glasses on, 2 seconds. 1886. You can see that all the outlined green areas right here were the Ottoman Empire in 1798. Right here. And over here in this area, even some of here. And then you have by 1896 what they had lost. And then the red is 1914. And then you can see the eastern limit frontiers lost by 1920. So you can just see the evolution of the Ottoman Empire, but initially when you see the green line, the solid one, you can see how extensive the Ottoman Empire was. Excuse Miss Cannon, sorry. Now, they also had a problem. When you go back to this map and you look at this area here with the Ottoman Empire, there are a lot of different, they're covering 3 different types of regions. You have Africa, Europe, and some of the Middle Eastern areas right here, like Iraq and Syria and Turkey. So when you think about these cultures, they're going to have similarities, but they're going to have a lot of differences as well. You have too many groups. You got the Greeks, the Bulgarians, the Turks, the Kurds, the Arabs, and the Jews, and it goes on. And just like I said previously with Austria, and you're going to have a couple issues because people have different history. They have different ideals, religions, all of that. Different ideas on how to rule the government. And you put them all in one area or under one empire. And they're not always going to necessarily agree. Now, the Ottoman Empire is going to be involved in a couple wars. The Crimean War, which is where Russia is going to fight against Great Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire. And then you'll have the Balkan Wars. Now, this war, if you notice, is against nations, and you're including an empire here. But then when you talk about the Balkan Wars is going to be between the ethnic groups. So these original guys that you talked about right here, they're going to be at war with each other. Now, what's going to happen in the Balkan Wars is that, first of all, Russia is going to become involved. And the main reason Russia wants to be involved is because they wanted a route to the Mediterranean. Mediterranean means trade, y'all. Now, because it's the Mediterranean Sea, it leads out to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, what's going to happen when the Ottoman Empire is that they're going to lose most of its land in Europe, okay? And by 1878, the Congress of Berlin's going to meet, and what they're going to do is overturn Russian gains from the Balkan War, and they gave part of the Balkans to Austria-Hungary with no regard to the ethnic groups. This is going to lead to turmoil. Because what eventually the Balkan Peninsula will be called is the powder keg of Europe. Miss Cannon is going to get to that later when I get back on Monday and Tuesday. We're going to discuss this powder keg aspect. But what you need to understand is that a big mistake is when you give over some land that has different ethnic groups and you don't regard the ethnic groups, their beliefs, histories, religions, all of those things. This is going to stir and cause a ruckus in Europe. It's interesting when you study nationalism as well as imperialism because there is a consistent buildup of issues. Here's Europe after the Congress of Berlin in 1878. Ottoman Empire, Russia, Austria-Hungary, German Empire, there's Belgium, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal. You can see how it's changed extensively from 1815. Now, here's some results that are going to happen. You're going to have the Young Turks. The Young Turks are going to be fighting against absolute power of the Sultan. Sultan's the leader. And they're going to want a Turkish constitution. Remember, constitution gives you rights, laws, things like that. And they had increased nationalism. And as a whole, the Ottoman Empire had increased nationalism. You're going to have conflicting ethnicities. So ethnic groups are not always going to get along. And then there are going to be alliances that form in the Ottoman Empire as well. Now, we're going to talk about Russia. Russia, what's going to happen is that Russia is, when you think of Russia during the 1800s, they're going to be, I don't want to say behind, but they don't get on the train like everybody else with industrialism. So first of all, they're going to have a czar. A czar is a king. So when you hear the word czar, you just want to pretty much think king, because that's what a czar is. They're going to have an autocracy, which is where one ruler with an absolute power, I told you czar, monarch, okay? They're very agricultural. They will still have the concept of serfdom in Russia. And what's going to start to happen, though, is that the Russians are going to notice that other European nations have gone towards democracy, or their parliaments are stronger, more people have rights. So people are going to start to rebel. And a group called the Decembrists will be rebellious, and in 1825 they're going to rise up. They're going to refuse to acknowledge the Tsar's successor, which is Nicholas I. So they're openly not acknowledging him as the leader of Russia. Now, what's going to happen is that Alexander II in 1855, what he's going to do is, first of all, in the Crimean War, it's going to show the weaknesses of Russia, which we just talked about. The Ottoman Empire was involved, and they were actually fighting against Russia. And what's going to happen is that in the Crimean War, their weaknesses are truly going to show because they are very behind. You have to think about if you are fighting nations that have a more organized military or are ahead in industrialism and things like that, that you are behind in technology and in society. So what Alexander II is going to do is he's going to free serfs. He's going to reform the government. But what will happen is that he'll be assassinated, unfortunately, by the People's Will Group. Assassination is going to get kind of big in Russia. Now, Alexander III will be the reactionary, and he wants to go back to how things were done in the past. So he sees what his father did as the reforms, and he's like, oh, we need to change it, go back to what we were doing. Now, you're going to have one problem in Russia during this time, and it's going to be the pogroms, which are people who are going to start attacking and killing Jews in Russia. So that is racism, that's persecution and discrimination against a religious group. Now, 1894, you're going to have the Romanov dynasty, and they are going to begin building the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which, what's going to happen is that it's going to open up and expand Russia as far as transportation goes and goods and things like that, because the Trans-Siberian Railroad runs across Russia, the nation. But what's going to happen is that Serbia is going to have conflicts with it as well as Russia. They're going to have issues. If you look, it runs from here all the way over here. Okay? But it's also like scooping down into some other countries, which could open up trade. Another couple of things that are going to happen is that Japan and Russia are going to go to war, and it's going to be the Russo-Japanese War, and it's ultimately the Japanese are going to weaken Russia. And in 1902, Vladimir Lenin calls for the Socialist Republic. Now, one thing that you need to understand about this family is that they will be the last dynasty. The Romanov dynasty will be the last dynasty of Russia. If you've ever seen the movie Anastasia, it's a Disney movie. Anastasia is part of the Romanov family. Um, when we talk about Bloody Sunday in 1905, it's going to be a deadly revolt against people who want reform and change in Russia. They want to get rid of the dynasty or the monarch, and then it'll be against the military, the Russian military. Now, Nicholas II is going to issue a manifesto, which is like a promise for reform. He's going to promise a Russian constitution to include civil liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Also, he's going to state, it states that Russians would elect people to the Duma. Duma is the lawmaking body in Russia. Um, and in 1906, the Duma meets, but Nicholas is going to end it. So the result of all this is going to be that the Russians still want reform, and they will pledge to get crazier and have more revolutionary acts. Now, you've already learned about two revolutions here. You have learned about the American Revolution, and you have learned about the French Revolution. And when anytime anybody promises a revolutionary act, it's going to be change, but it's not going to always be a peaceful change. A lot of times it's going to be a raucous, violent, bloodshedding change. But the October Manifesto was originally a promise, but it was not followed through. That's going to anger you people. It's just like England when, America asked them to change things. They did not. And France, the monarch didn't change things. They want to change, and so they decided to take matters into their own hands. Okay? This is Europe in 1914, right here. And ultimately, what's going to happen to the Romanov family is that they will be assassinated by revolutionaries. They'll be killed, the whole family. So this is Europe in 1914. I just want you to take a look here. Russian Empire, Ottoman Empire. And what's going to happen is that we're going to move on and talk about imperialism. So this is a new big concept. We're moving away from nationalism. We're talking about imperialism. So first of all, imperialism is going to be the policy of extending power and domination over another country or territory. When you think imperialism, you need to think like empire. And how what's going to happen is European nations are going to start taking over areas in South America and Africa and making it their own, and in Asia as well. An example is when the U.S. is annexing Hawaii to use as a fuel station in the South Pacific. Also, another example is the British taking over India, parts of Asia, to control the tea trade, which we're going to talk about India in the next few slides. Here's imperialism in the modern world in the 1900s. So if you look at each certain color represents certain nations, and then you can see that the colors have spread. Like Great Britain has a hold on Canada, okay? The United States has a hold on the United States. This is Alaska. You can also see like Great Britain has areas in Africa, India, Australia. So if you want to sit for a second and take a look at what nation was running who, most of the nations that were participating in imperialism were nations that had stronger economies, had a stronger government, and they had established systems and political order, and they have the ability to go to areas and take the land over. So if you're noticing, what's the big deal with Africa? What do you see in the map? You see that Africa is taken over by a large amount of European nations. Africa, financially, politically, in their society, to the Europeans are considered uncivilized and also not as educated. So they feel like they can take advantage of this group of people. The United States will participate in it as well. You can see there are a few colors in South America, extensive here in the islands of Asia. Here's another map in 1914. Now, what's going to happen is that what's going to set the stage for imperialism is new technologies. Gunboats, rifles, machine guns, exploding shells, which are like shells that land, they make this loud noise and they explode shrapnel everywhere, it's just like metals. Um, what you have to understand is just like when we talked about the Columbian Exchange and we talked about the natives in South America and Europe, whoever's got the better weapons, whoever's got the more manpower, they're the one who's getting the job done. They're the one who's taking control. And so what you need to understand with um, them is that they're setting the stage. The weaponry, all of it sets the stage for imperialism. If you have a machine gun and I have a sword or a spear, that's not going to work out for the people with swords and spears. Same thing that happened with the natives. Now, the British are going to be in India. They're going to be in the British East India Company, and they're going to be a trading company. And they will be controlled by trade between Great Britain, India, and Southeast Asia. So they're going to have a little bit of a monopoly on the trade. Now, what's going to happen though is that the British are going to try to play it very smart. And what they will end up doing, excuse Miss Cannon, is they are going to manipulate their rulers of the Indian states, because India is a country, but it's going to have these smaller states inside of it. And what they're going to do is pit them against each other. So when I tell you that Britain is pitting them against each other, they're going to make it seem like each one of them is a bad guy, or that each one of them is doing something or talking about the other. And what they're going to do is try to mess with the unity that the Indian states have with each other. And this is how the British are going to slip their hands in. So what they will do is the British will also bring in the armies to capture India, but what they're going to say ultimately, and there's like an underlining meaning, they're going to be like, hey, we're trying to help you guys restore order here in India. But really what they're going to end up doing is they're not restoring order, they're trying to take over India. So it's more of like a deceitful kind of mission where it's like, hey, we'll help you get everybody together and unified. How can you organize the chaos that you started in the first place? There has to be an ulterior or underlying motive. Understand that about the British. During imperialism, and this is not to knock British people, but they're really big on taking other people over. So they'll lie, they'll steal, they'll do whatever they can. They want more power. Now, what they're going to do in India, though, is that they are going to have a new education system, the English language. They're going to ban certain Hindu practices, which, if you remember correctly from what we learned before, Hinduism is the big religion in India. And they're going to say, hey, Christian missionaries, go ahead and come on through to India. So this is going to lead to conflict between the Indians and the British. Why? What are some reasons? What do you think? Okay, there are going to be several things that are going to deal with differences in religion, differences in education, practices, history. They're going to be upset because you have a new group of people who are coming in and telling the Indians what to do. And guys, when I say Indians, I'm talking about people in India. So these people have their own established culture. They've been trading for a very long period of time. They don't want people telling them what to do. They don't want people shoving things down their throat. They're not going to like it. And what is going to ultimately happen is that what the British they're going to try to do is they are going to try to establish an army, and they're going to get Indian soldiers to be in the British Army, okay? And it's in 1857 they start relationships to that are ultimately going to lead to a rebellion. But first of all, they start the sepoys. The sepoys are Indian soldiers in the British Army. And one thing that you're going to notice about the sepoys, and I'm going to show you a picture in a second, is that their uniform and their dress are very similar to British culture, and they're westernized. But what will happen is that these sepoys are going to fight in this army, and they're under the British, and they're going to take Indian leaders and put them in the military as well. And they kind of make it seem like, oh, well, you're fighting with us, not just for us. But what will happen is that there will be an introduction of a new rifle, and the rifle is a great rifle, but the problem is that the soldiers have to bite off a cartridge before the insertion. Okay? They just got to bite off this cartridge and stick it in the gun. Ultimate problem though. Culture, the cartridge is greased with pork and beef fat. Let me tell you something. Why would this offend Muslims or Hindus? Let's think about it for 2 seconds. Hindus do not eat beef. Don't even kill cows. They stop in the street for cows to walk by because they believe cows are sacred. Second of all, Muslims do not eat pork, and you've learned both of these in our world religions unit, mini unit. So what is going to happen is that this is going to piss these people off. These Indians are going to be highly offended because most of them are predominantly Muslim or Hindu. They are not going to be feeling it. They are going to be upset. What you need to think about is that the effects of the mutiny, outer sights and brutality is going to be committed by both sides. What you need to understand is that in 1858, the British Army, they're no longer going to have control. Well, the BEITC is not going to have any control over India, and Great Britain is going to take over completely, okay? And they're going to establish their rule on India. If you look at the sepoys, they are still rocking their turban or their head wraps, but they do have more westernized or European uniforms. Another thing that we need to talk about is the Raj. The era of British rule in India is called the Raj. Most British workers believed the Indians were inferior and incapable of ruling themselves, so they're not going to allow themselves. What's going to happen is that the Indians had to live in separate neighborhoods and had limited rights, and the British are going to improve the Indians' infrastructures, which infrastructures are like railroads, canals, dealing with things like that. So they're going to improve that in India. But as far as their Indian relations go, they're going to have, the British are going to have this ideal that they're better than everybody else, and that these people don't have to answer to them, or that they don't matter as much, or things like that. And it's going to make a difference. And the British improved Indians' railroads, canals, and all those types of things, but it kind of doesn't, it's going to benefit the British more than anybody else. And the Indians were, India was the market for British goods. Something that's going to happen is that raw materials are going to become big during this time. They already were for a long amount of time. But what's going to happen is that you have cotton, indigo, tea, and jute. But what the Indians are going to become known for is that Great Britain is going to get cotton from India. It's going to be their biggest resource because during this time, America is in the Civil War. And the Civil War is going to ruin the South's economy, especially the cotton market where cotton used to be king, because they're going to fight this war and they're going to be very engrossed in it and busy, and they don't have time to trade, and the South is going to be burned to the ground in some areas, and they're no longer farming like they used to. So what you need to think about is that India is going to be that top producer of cotton for Britain, because Britain needs the cotton for their textile factories, which is clothing. Indian nationalism. When we talk about Indian nationalism, they're going to have the Indian National Congress, which will form in 1885. And what's going to happen is that it's going to fight for the rights of Indian citizens, mainly made up of Indian Hindus. So these are Indian people who practice Hinduism. They're going to boycott British goods from 1905 to 1908. And the Indian Muslims are going to form the Muslim League in 1906. And this is going to lead to conflict between those two groups. So we're trying to do good things for the Indian population, but we have two religions there that cannot get along to help benefit their needs. I'm going to end this video here. Make sure you have all your notes written, and I will continue on Monday with the rest of my lesson. If you do not complete this video, please do so over the weekend. I hope you are behaving and having a wonderful day. I hope you have a great weekend, and if you go to prom, be safe. Remember that you can fast forward, stop, and rewind this video, but you need to listen to this lecture completely. Thank you.